Live everyone, come in. I'm live everyone, come in. It's more than I can say for Mr. Salamander. If I'd found him or his people trampling over the lines, I'd have had his guts for garters. And I don't care how important he thinks he is. Matt glanced at Pedro, who was looking out of the window. Even though there was very little to see. Okay, he asked. Pedro nodded. You should get some sleep. The professor said this could be a long night. 2 hours later, she stopped and checked her map. The sun had virtually disappeared below the horizon, but there was still a red glow in the sky, as if it was unwilling to let go of the heat of the day. The professor pushed the gear stick into four-wheel drive. Okay. You okay? Oh, oh, dear. Thank you. One of the four-wheel drive almost at once. The Jeep began to bounce up and down. Up and down as it swooped the bitumen surface of the highway for the rough stones and rocks of the desert floor. Reading that. Of the desert floor. They drove for another hour. The professor glanced a couple more times at the map, but she had a good idea where they were going. After all, she had been visiting this place for more than 20 years and knew just about every inch of it. At last she stopped. We can walk this last part, she said. There are spades in the back. Also water bottles, sandwiches, and most important of all is chocolate. Proving chocolate is absolutely first rate. By the way, nothing like those sticky little bars you get in England. Matt stepped out of the Jeep. He guessed that the great rectangle, the place of Kulaka, must be somewhere in front of him, but he could see nothing of it. The rapidly faded light didn't help. He understands now with why vernacular lines had remained uncovered for as long. There was nothing to see at ground level, apart from a flat, empty platter. He was like an ant crawling across a tabletop. The landscape was simply too big to clip only from above would the pictures become visible. He had seen them clearly from the plane. Now he was among them. They had disappeared. Look here, Professor, Chambers called out. She turned on the torch and pointed it down the beam of light, picked out tire tracks. Freshly made map guessed it seemed that the desert was a bit like the surface of the moon in that any mark stayed there permanently. The professor followed the tire tracks for a short distance, then swung the torch around. Two cars had come. This was where they had stopped. There were dozens of footprints. Several people must have got out. This is going to be easier than I thought, Professor Chambers muttered. What do you mean, Richard asked. Your poems tells us to stand in front of the place of Kwawaka. That's where we are now, and somewhere here. There must be something, as I've already made perfectly clear. It must be below the surface, because if it wasn't, I'd have seen it, in which case I thought we'd have to spend our night. Half a night digging, but that's not the case. All we have to do is follow the footsteps. Mr. Salamander may think he's clever, but he's left us a path. They followed the footsteps away from the jeep and ever further into the desert. After about 200 meters, they come to an area where some sort of digging had obviously taken place. The earth was loose, and in the light of the torch, the colour was quite different. Yes, Professor James handed him the torch. The four of you can start digging. I'm going back to the jeep. What for? It's obviously I'm going to make the tea. There was one spade for each of them, and together they began to dig. There was barely enough light left to see by to Matt. It seemed that the other three were little more than shadows. It was still hot. After just a few minutes of digging, the dust had clogged in Matt's throat. It swung his eyes and settled in his hair. He could feel the sweat making muddy tracks as it trickled down his face. Pedro had stopped digging. He was now holding a torch for the others, but the earth already disturbed once come away easily. In just a few minutes they had dug a trench half a meter deep. Meanwhile, the The professor had returned with the food and and a primus stove. Man had the hiss of gas and then the pop of a flame as she lit it and began to boil some more for tea. She clearly had no fear of being seen, but then the stove. The stove only lets out a tiny pinprick of light in the gas entries of the desert, and it was highly unlikely there was a guard anywhere near. A tock spade hit the ground with a loud clang. "There is something," he said. Richard and Matt stopped and went over to where he was working. He had stuck some sort of brickwork. "Be careful," Professor Chambers called. Was she afraid of what they might find, or was it that she didn't want them to do any damage to something that might be of archaeological interest? Quickly the four of them began to scoop away the earth using the side edges of their spade. Professor Chambers came back over with the torch. Something flat and square had been revealed. She swung the light over it and saw a brick platform decorated with a design in the center as they scraped off the last of the earth. More of the design was revealed. At last they could see it. Professor Chambers looked down and frowned. "I take it that this is the sign you described to me?" she asked. "The sign of the old ones?" "Yes," Matt whispered. He shivered. The heat seemed to have evaporated. "This is the sign. But what is the thing that it's on?" Richard asked. "It's a platform." The professor peered more closely at it. "About 5 meters square, I would say. The bricks are made of andesite. Nothing usual about that. But the design arrows are squiggling lines. That's quite wrong." Pedro asked a question. Artok translated. "What is it doing here?" "Do you know?" Matt asked. As a matter of fact, I do have a plenty good idea." Professor Chambers ran the torch over the surface. "One last time, let's have some tea before we cover this back up," she stuttered, "and while we're sitting down we can have a talk." They went back to the primus stove and Professor Chambers filled 5 mugs with hot sweet tea made with mint leaves that she had picked from her garden. Apart from the hiss of the gas, all was silent in the great emptiness of the desert. "I'll try to keep this simple," she began. "Although it isn't. It's actually bloody complicated, but I've told you about the mystery of Nazca lines. Now I've got to explain to you my solution to the mystery. I actually wrote a book about it a while ago, although not many people believed me." She fell silent for a moment. "Maybe Salamander read it. Maybe I'm partly responsible for everything that's happened. I'll try to explain." As I told you, I've studied the lines for most of my life. I was fan, fascinated by them from the moment that I first saw them, and at the time I thought it was because they were so beautiful, so very pretty, so very perfect. As the years went on, I really realized that I was wrong. I can't explain how it happened, but how you had would. I began I began to believe that there was something evil about them. The pictures of animals are wonderful. I didn't deny it, but it crossed my mind that to the ancient Nazarene people 2,000 years ago, they must have been terrifying to two huge spiders, monstrous whales, even the monkey is grotesque, reaching out with its spindly arms. It has only four fingers on one hand. Why do you think that the people who draw the lines give it one finger too few? One finger too few. Maybe they couldn't count. Richard said, "No, no, no, they couldn't count perfectly well, but you see, in primitive society, deformity is something to be feared. A bad omen, maybe. That's the point. All animals could have been drawn simply to scare people." Maybe they couldn't count, Richard said. No, no, they could count perfectly well. But you see, in private solitude, deformity is something to be feared. A bad omen, maybe it's the point. All animals could have been drawn simply to scare people. She took out another cigar and lit it. The smoke snowed against the black night sky. Most people now agree that the nautical lines have something to do with the stars. She went on. I actually studied astronomy at university a long time ago, and from the very start it was my option that the lines were nothing more, no less than a huge star map. This is how it would work. A line would point to a star at line and look down it, and if you saw a star rising up over the horizon right in front of you, you'd know it was the 5th of April, and time to start planting the grain or whatever easy enough. But later on I started to think about it more. What would happen if there was a moment, perhaps no more than a few minutes in 1,000 years, when all the lines pointed to all the visible stars at exactly the same time? Now, what would be? Please stop time. I'm eyeballing you, Matthew. Matt's head was cranked upwards. His eyes were searching the night sky. He had been listening to begin with, but something had distracted him. What was it? There was no sound in the desert. No, there it was again, a beating in the air like a flag caught in the wind. He waited, his eyes pricked, but it had gone. Are you listening to Professor Chambers? Asked Matt, turned to Yes, of course. Good, because this is where things get a bit more complicated. As I was saying, I wondered if all the stars could again with all the NASA lines, but how would this happen? Well, imagine that you could lie on your back on the desert floor and take a photograph of the night sky. You'd end up with a big sheet of paper with lots of dots on it. Then you could go up in the air and take a photograph of the lines, making a second picture. What I was looking for was a time when the stars in the first picture would fall exactly on the lines in the second picture. A sort of joins the dots on a cosmic scale. Richard said, exactly, of course. This wouldn't happen very often. It might never happen at all. You see, the stars always seems to be moving when you look at them from the Earth. The reason for this is that it's the Earth that's actually moving and spinning. On its own axis. That's why the stars never seemed to be in the same position, and the Earth isn't only spinning, it's also orbiting around the Sun. And as it orbits, it wobbles. Astronomers call this wobble precession, and what it means is that the Earth is only in exactly the same position once every 26,000 years. So to go right back to where I started, what I would have wondered and what I wrote about in my book was suppose that the Nazca lines were down, a sort of terrible warning. Suppose that what they were doing was recording one moment in 26,000 years when they would finally line up. That's Minecraft, what I've done, Edward. They would finally line up with the stars and the world would come to an end. What would explain why the pictures were so frightening. It would explain why they had to be drawn in the first place. And you think the lines will all again with the stars 2 nights from now? Richard asked. that I was never be able to test my therapy before now because I never had I got my hands that some observers and platform. Don't forget that this desert covers 500 square kilometers. I had to know exactly where to stand to see the stars in the right position. And now you do. Yes, suddenly Pedro Pedro sprang to his feet. Pedro, the professor, looked at him. Quartermaster. Matt stood up too. I heard something just a moment ago, he said. Read last one. The premise stove was still burning, the little gas jet throwing a blue glow. The premise stove was still burning, the little gas jet throwing a blue glow across the ground. The jeep stood where it had been parked. The night had grown cool, and now there was a faint touch of breeze in the air. Matt looked up at the sky at the millions of glistering stars. For a moment, he thought he saw two tiny green lights. He shook his head. There was no such thing as a green star. You're imagining things, Richard said. There's nothing out here. Unwilling, Pedro and Matt sat down again. They couldn't leave until they had covered their tracks, and they weren't ready to begin work again yet. The platform marks the exact position where you have to stand it to see the alignment of the stars. The professor continued, that's what it said in the verse you showed me before. The place of Kuloka, there will be light be seen. The light that is the end of all lights. Matt finished the poem. Professor Chambers nodded gravely. There you have it. Again, this is the place, and we also know the time 2 days from now in Interrimi. That's when the gate opens. Exactly, we don't know where the gate is, Richard. Cut in. There are no stone circles in the desert. What makes you think it has to be a stone circle? Suddenly Artok cried out and pointed, and there were again two green lights burning in the air above them. Read lesson. I'll read tomorrow. like that. Proud of that. Edward. Love that. Okay. Mm. Can't remember, Edward. I do miniature clay food videos. Tie in on you to come up. Okay, but I like ABBA music. Got that on CD. Good. Mm. Mm. I told them. Here's when I do Santa. When I do Santas. Subscribe it below to let me know. Click on main screen. Watch the next video from start to finish. I hope I get to 50k subscribers. Click on my thumbnail, my description, title, end screen. Watch my next video from start to finish. Subscribe it below to let thank you. Watch my next video from start to finish. Hit the bell for more uploads, thank you. Watch my next video from start to finish. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for coming. Come to my stream next time, thank you. Thank you for coming, thank you very much. See you next time.